more opportunities.
On this edition of Native Report, we meet the first Native American to serve as president of the Minnesota State Bar Association. We see how clients are benefiting from innovative services offered close to home, thanks to the Shakopee Mdewakanton Mobile Clinic. And we hear what inspired artist Steve Premo to paint a mural depicting a rescue from a devastating fire. We also hear from our elders and learn something new about Indian country on this Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Blandin Foundation, and the Grotto Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Stacey Thunder. Leo Brisbois grew up on Minnesota's Iron Range. His mother and father raised their children with discipline and high standards. And that is exactly what Leo credits for giving him the desire to excel and give back to the community. Leo Brisbois' professional accomplishments are impressive. Senior counsel for a Minnesota law firm and president of the Minnesota State Bar Association. The life experiences of his parents and grandparents are what inspired Leo into public service.
You know, my grandparents survived the boarding school experience, and my grandfather was at Carlisle and my grandmother went to Flandreau. And yet we're able to instill in my father that ethic of service and public service, which was then passed on to me and my siblings. I have to say that that's an inspiration. I mean, I spent a great deal of time in my inaugural remarks commenting about how just basic public service has been the model of my parents' life, not in any sort of formal role, but just helping neighbors and advancing issues that make lives better for their neighbors and their friends and basic Minnesotans. And someday I hope people say those kind of things about me, but I mean that's what public service is about, not being elected to something, but making life better for your neighbors.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was born in Aurora, Minnesota, and grew up in Hibbing on the Iron Range, and graduated from Hibbing High School, and then went to Hamlin Law School in St. Paul. And after law school, I served as an Army judge advocate in Europe in the late 1980s, came home in 1990, and ended up, after a year with the Court of Appeals, getting a job with the firm that I'm with now, Stitch Angel, Kreidler & Dodge, and went into private practice. That's a short educational and professional bio, but my family is White Earth Ojibwe from northwestern Minnesota, and that's where my father and his sisters grew up, and my grandparents are from, and they're all enrolled members. And so I grew up, which is only 2 hours and a half, give or take, from Hibbing. So I spent a lot of time in growing up as a kid in that area with my grandparents.
Did you always want to be an attorney?
No, as a matter of fact, I went to Hamlin to be a teacher. My father was the first from his family to go to college. It took him 7 years working through St. John's, Bemidji, ended up graduating ultimately from Mayville in North Dakota. And he was a school teacher, English and history in junior high schools. My grandmother and her sisters, they didn't go to college, but after they got educational training in the early 1900s, and they taught in the one-room schools all around the White Earth Reservation. So I kind of had a family history of trying to give back through teaching, and I thought that's what I was going to do. So I had a secondary license when I graduated from college in 1984. But as circumstances are, there was a depression in student enrollment, which made jobs unavailable.
Brisbois is the first MSBA president of Native American descent. And as such, this teacher-turned-lawyer brings a different perspective to the position.
I didn't grow up on the reservation, but it's always been a part of who we are, and it's always been a part of how I think I see the world slightly differently than others. Maybe it's in the leadership style. You know, one of the questions I often got as I was leading up to it, you know, what is your agenda? You know, what are you going to make the bar do during your year? That's not Native leadership style, at least not in the Anishinaabe community.
Tell us about the role of president of the Minnesota State Bar Association.
It's a 4-year officer progression. So you start being elected to the secretary's position. You move the next year to the treasurer's position, president-elect, which is vice president, and then the president. The Minnesota State Bar Association has almost 17,000 members in the state of Minnesota. It's the largest attorney volunteer organization in the state. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the trust and confidence of the members of the Minnesota American Indian Bar Association and appointing me to the Board of Governors in 1998.
For Brisbois, the Minnesota American Indian Bar Association has a broader mission.
Indian children have a hard time, you know, are challenged to get out of high school. The barriers don't get any easier to go to college. The barriers are it's tremendous to graduate from college. So by the time you're talking about law school and graduate school, I forget the exact year, but it's within the last 4 or 5 years, ABA statistics show that nationally less than 400 American Indians matriculated in law school. And 3 years later, there were barely more than 300 that were still in school. So if that's the national rate that that Indian people are becoming attorneys, it's really incumbent on organizations like the Minnesota American Indian Bar Association to mentor and help those people who do get into law school from Indian communities to succeed and graduate and then go back to either work in the communities directly or work for private firms and represent tribes, or just work in the law in general and be examples of what can be achieved through education.
Are there any heroes or people you look up to, someone who's influenced you in a great deal?
You know, and everybody says their parents, but I really mean my father. As I said, I mean, he grew up, we call it the swamp, Wawashkiki, because that's what it is. It's a self-subsistence farm, which barely kept them alive, but, you know, as a kid, and, you know, was out in the middle of the woods. In the wintertime, the cars couldn't even get to it. You know, and from that level of poverty to to work, the effort that he did to go to not to go to college and make a better life for, you know, more opportunities for my brother and sister and I, you know, and then, because without that, none of what I've been able to do or where I'm at is possible. And, you know, and even then before him, my ancestors and the elders.
Did you know in central Minnesota, a large mural depicts the heroism of an Ojibwe woman during one of the most deadly fires in American history? American Indian artist Steve Premo painted the mural of the historic rescue of a family by a young Ojibwe woman. The fire occurred on September 1st, 1894, and centered on the town of Hinckley, Minnesota. The fire killed hundreds, with estimates ranging from 400 to 800 dead. The exact number will never be known, partly because a number of the dead were American Indians, and an exact count of how many tribal members were lost was not well reported. Scattered blazes united in a firestorm with temperatures reaching 1,000 degrees. The fire occurred after a 2-month drought, destroyed 6 towns, and left over 400 square miles black and smoldering. The mural was unveiled in 1999 and can be viewed at the Hinckley Fire Museum.
Since 2007, the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community Mobile Unit has been serving as an emergency command center and mobile clinic. They provide innovative care to clients all over Minnesota and maybe to a community near you.
Bringing quality health care services to Native American communities is one goal of the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Communities Health Department and Emergency Services.
The concept with the vehicle was to be able to bring health care to those who do not have access to health care, to bring it to them, hopefully encouraging them to utilize it, utilize the services, and to close that gap that's there for people who don't have access to certain types of care. But we have dedicated this first part of our journey into hitting all of the tribes within Minnesota.
I'm just going to take a look here, all right?
The services range from dental care to diabetes clinics and from cancer screenings to child well checks.
We do have an area, a lab per se, in the clinic and equipment that we can take on the road with us. Depending upon the test, most of the tests that we're going to do are going to be a lab test or screening type test that we can have a result right then and there. Is your, what is your PSA number, or what is the lead test screening showing? So yeah, they are obviously tools, testing that we want to do to be able to talk to the patient at that time. Generally, the population that we're going to, you need, it's a controlled site. I mean, we're not parking on the corner of a street and having people come up. So we're usually very familiar with the group that's coming on, and it's whether it's not so much insurance or non-insurance, it's the tribe, the community, their own community trying to provide them that service. They may very well have a dental clinic on site, but maybe they don't have a hygienist every day of the week. Maybe they can't service all of their community within the time that they'd like to, or get the fluoride on the kids' teeth in the time frame that they'd like to. So that's what we come out and do is help, assist. We're not there to replace the tribe's own medical system. We're there to enhance, assist, and hopefully help them provide what they need.
The idea is to provide health care to as broad a population as possible, but there is an emphasis on elders who might feel uncomfortable with modern medicine.
The testing is just something we do to see if they have anything that we need to fix to help them go on their way and continue to do what it is they want to do. So things like colonoscopies, to screen for colon cancer, that's important. The mammograms are important to check to see if there's any breast cancer, things like that. But there's this whole wellness aspect that oftentimes gets neglected. A lot of Native people, and it's not just elders, just tend not to seek out medical care. And I'm not sure if it's because of mistrust or lack of understanding or fear or cultural communication barriers. There's a lot of reasons, I presume, and so those barriers need to be addressed.
How does traditional Native medicine connect to modern medicine?
I think the two can work together wonderfully, and it can be a beautiful marriage with wonderful outcomes. And actually, this is where healthcare should be going, at least for our people, because we've had this traditional Indian medicine for so many years. It's so old, and it's worked for so long, and it continues to work. I think it just doesn't get the respect that it deserves. And there's a lot of important aspects to that process. And I don't know, I think the two can work together beautifully and should, and we should try to seamlessly integrate them in the current healthcare system. I work with some of the traditional healers, medicine men, spiritual advisors now, and they're great mentors, and they have a lot of knowledge to impart, things they want to teach that need to get passed on. There's some very, very old medicines and traditions that are so effective, and yet there's so much out there to do and learn.
The mobile unit is also used for events such as the Twin Cities Marathon, and neighboring Scott County will use the facility to provide services to uninsured and underinsured populations.
We worked out an agreement with Scott County where the mobile is being utilized by Scott County Public Health, and they are going out trying to outreach into their community and their uninsured population to provide whatever basics they determine they're going to provide, health checkups, plug them into the programming that they may need, help direct them. There again, they're looking at the people who aren't coming in or don't have insurance to come in, where the tribe is providing the vehicle and they are providing the staff, and then we are going to various locations within Scott County on a regular basis.
With the ability for the vehicle to be used in whatever capacity it is needed, the mobile clinic is reducing barriers to health care.
The most identifiable barrier is basically the ability to get the care. Based on where someone lives or the region in which they live, you just can't drive a couple blocks and get a mammogram. The technology may not be there. It's not something close and accessible. So that's the largest barrier, I think, is bringing the health care to the people. The second barrier is the trust barrier, or that fear that people sometimes have, whether it be our elders or people who just really don't want to walk into that clinic or hospital setting to get a service done. They're kind of on their own turf. We're playing on their field. They're comfortable, they're at home, they're at their community center, they're wherever they may be, and I think providing that breaks down that barrier also.
I want all the elders to know that they can and should seek out medical care, and that they should feel free to inquire and pursue traditional Indian medicine as well, and take the two, put them together, and get more miles on their tires. Get a longer, healthier, happier life, more productive, so that they can teach the youth. We have to close that gap because we're losing too many people, and we need to pass on all of our traditions and really have the circle complete.
This is a Dickonogan. It's a cradle board of the Chippewa Indians that made for their little children. It was made for me by my great aunt, who was wife of Chief Joe Bois. So the ladies would line the Dickonogan with rabbit fur, and so the children would stay warm in it. The rabbit fur was all the fur was toward the child, and then they put moss around so the baby, using it as diapers, because they didn't have diapers in those days. So the moss and the rabbit fur kept the babies warm. Oftentimes the ladies would put the babies against a tree, and then if the wind came along and knocked it over, well, this would save the child. This is a dream catcher, and it's when the children are sleeping or have a dream, this helps them to understand their dream.
One of the most devastating events in Minnesota history was the Hinckley Fire of 1894. The firestorm incinerated hundreds of square miles and killed more than 400 people. The rescue of a non-native family by a young Ojibwe woman inspired Steve Premo to paint a mural depicting unity between people.
The mural near the Hinckley Fire Museum depicts the terrifying ordeal of 2 women and 4 children desperately fleeing the 19th century inferno known as the Great Hinckley Fire.
The veracity of the firestorm. I can't imagine, what they said that the lights came on, the street lights came on in Duluth with all the smoke that was there, coming from here. So it was a dark day. These are 2 different cultures coming together and surviving on a bad day, basically.
The painting shows the rescue of Mary Patrick and her 2 children by Mukadegwan, Ojibwe for Blackfeather, a story that has taken on the shimmer of folklore.
The day of the fire, the fire came from the south, and Mukadegwan, or Mrs. McDonald, lived on the northern shore of Grindstone Lake, and she was trying to, I guess, escape the fire, and she was in a canoe. But she heard some yelling across the lake, and she took her canoe over to the other side of the lake and found the Patrick family there in the water, trying to get away from the fire. And I guess the next day she brought him back to the house and gave him food and made him moccasins and helped him survive the fire.
This wasn't just any fire, this was a firestorm.
The fire in California in 2009 burned after 2 weeks, 160,000 acres. The Great Hinckley Fire burned 300,000 acres, almost double, but it didn't do it in 2 weeks, it did it in 4 hours. This gives you an idea of the intensity and power of this fire. The reason these people were fleeing they're trying to escape to save themselves. When people heard about the fire approaching, like in Sandstone, they said, there's a fire coming. It's as high as the sky, and it'll be here in minutes. Mrs. Patrick was not with her husband. He was working. So they were on the edge of the lake, the Grindstone Lake, and Mukadegwan was responsible for collecting them together. There's a blanket in our case over there that was wet down and laid over Frank Patrick, the 2-year-old, the wet blanket to prevent ash from falling on him. You've got to realize that with this hot, intense fire, people's hair would set on fire, their clothes would get on fire. So the fact that they could wet down would help them a great deal.
The painting evolved from the Patrick story, as told by Frank Patrick. Further research, however, brought to light the parallel story of Mukadegwan, also known as Mrs. McDonald.
Frank Patrick was a Hinckley fire survivor that worked or came into the Fire Museum and told the story of his survival in the Hinckley fire. And it was pretty intriguing to know that a Mille Lacs band member then was the person that saved his family, or his mother and his 2 brothers, or his mother and his brother from the fire. He would refer to Mrs. McDonald as old Mrs. McDonald, and that was the story he had to go on to put the mural together from his accounts. And that was before the research we did into Mukadegwan. We found that old Mrs. McDonald was really a young Mrs. McDonald.
This rescue is one of many stories from that day, but this is a story of 2 cultures overcoming adversity.
I wanted to show through basically times of adversity that people come together and help each other. And that was the intent of the mural. And that's what I wanted to show. And hopefully people come away with that understanding.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org. Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Stacey Thunder. See you next time on Native Report.
Stacey Thunder is an enrolled member of and legal counsel for the Red Lake Nation. And Ted Johnson is an enrolled member of the Bois Forte Band of Ojibwe and is Solicitor General for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Blandin Foundation, and the Grotto Foundation.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Stacey Thunder. See you next time on Native Report.
Stacey Thunder is an enrolled member of and legal counsel for the Red Lake Nation. And Ted Johnson is an enrolled member of the Bois Forte Band of Ojibwe and is Solicitor General for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Blandin Foundation, and the Grotto Foundation. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Blandin Foundation, and the Grotto Foundation.